More details concerning the closure of Green Bay Correctional Institution likely to come out during the governor's budget address just a couple of hours away now.
Part of a sweeping plan by the governor to spend some $500 million to reform the state's prison system at just about every level. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman will be there. He's live in Madison now with a preview of the expectations from both sides of the aisle. Jason.
Bill, that address will take place on the assembly floor as the governor lays out his spending plan for the next 2 years. This will likely include his proposal to close GBCI. Republicans support that, but ongoing negotiations on how to get to that point are just getting underway. For the first time since the governor's initial announcement over the weekend that his intention is to close Green Bay Correctional Institution by 2029, lawmakers expect to hear more specifics Tuesday night.
I do expect him to comment on this. I don't think there's many issues that are bigger than this, certainly for our region. So I'm fully expecting that a closure of a major prison operation and relocating 1,000 inmates across the state, well, that's kind of big news. I expect him to have that a part of the budget address.
Republicans like Representative David Steffen support the closure, but aren't willing to take the possibility of building a new prison off the table. The governor's proposal calls for reducing the population by expanding provisions for early release, something Republicans aren't yet willing to get behind. With GBCI facing allegations of inhumane conditions and overcrowding, both sides agree something has to happen.
That's a big issue because nobody really wants to spend money on incarcerating individuals. You know, obviously trying to get to the root of the problem and avoid people getting into that prison pipeline is the best. But the fact of the matter is we have very outdated facilities that are putting both staff and those who are incarcerated at risk.
The governor is also expected to address other items as well, which include helping families with the cost of child care and additional funding for public education, while providing support for farmers across the state. The governor is scheduled to speak at 7. We'll have complete coverage tonight at 10, plus reaction from local lawmakers. Reporting live in Madison, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.